So there's a 60-day period. We've heard about it, we've read about it, it's been over a week, it's been in the news. What do you think success looks like for those DIBs, regardless of the outcome? So, take a stab at that if you don't mind. And I'll pass it to Zach on this one.
Yeah, no, thanks, Jermaine. Yeah, so what does success look like? It goes back to even the slide previously, right? So do you have a CEO who is aligned with his CISO, his IT department, or whomever they've put in charge, right? A lot of these smaller DIB companies they're running lean. They may not have a full-time CISO. They may be relying on a third party, but making sure you have that executive alignment and leadership pushing through, right? So to me, success for a company on this is understanding your pipeline and the solicitations you're going after. So that way you can backwards plan as well. Like everybody knows, phase 1 ends November 10th. You've got to have your self-attestation done by then. So really everybody's timeline for self-attestation should be backdated from there. But maybe you have a solicitation that's coming, that's going to be awarded in September. You have to know if that solicitation is going to let you do the November 10th deadline or buy the award, right? And those are questions you need to ask the KO to ensure that when you're bidding on those engagements, you have your self-attestation done. From a company standpoint, I think if you understand where you're at, whether that's a negative 203, 88, or a 110, understanding where you're at, how you can make sure you're updating your artifacts and your evidence to ensure if you are audited by the DIBCAC, you're able to say, yeah, hey, here's my CCB charter. Here's what we've done to change endpoint detection tools, and we did our risk analysis on it, right? So following those practices, if you have them already. If you still haven't started the process, well, you better hurry up and get on it. And establish those systems and procedures and make sure that you can answer all of the controls, whether it's level 1 or level 2.
That's great. Hey, Melody, what do you think on that same question? Regardless of the outcome, what could success look like?
Continuing to improve, like not stopping on the compliance part, even though compliance is not super sexy. It's again, treating it as extra time to do the remediation, updating your SSPs, fixing all the governance inside, and it's pulling together and being prepared. And like Zach said, the deadline for self-attestation is coming. So if you haven't done that, you're going to need to. Also, I think this is a good time. This pause is a good time for OSCs there's a RFI deadline of August that they could provide feedback to the DoD on their thoughts and experiences that might help with maybe what phase 2 will look like.
So, these are all good insights, right? So when I want to pivot a little bit because the DoD just put this out. So we of course, we're talking about the impact it could mean to the DIB, to C3POs, things of that nature. So Melody, if you were advising the department, this is our opportunity to advise the department, right? So that's what we do. We help people. So what changes would you recommend as they're going through the 60-day evaluation?
I think they should go back and look at their timelines and figure out a way to break it out a little bit more instead of just saying a year from here to here to get it done. Because the challenge was that there wasn't enough resources to be able to get their audits done. So there's that. Then you've got the small and medium businesses that are getting a little bit of a shock at the cost. And they may have bid on contracts without the thought of how much it would cost to maintain it from a security tools perspective. So, maybe it's like trying to figure out a way to break it out depending on what CUI they handle, whether it's going to be in an enclave or if there's a need for printing. All of those things change the cost.
Right. Yeah, definitely some impacts to consider there. and hopefully they're doing what's good for the entire ecosystem there. So Zach, for you, if you were advising someone at the department, maybe the head of the state there, right? What changes would you recommend? What comes to mind for you?
So we've been hearing about CUI since I was on contract back at Space Missile Defense Command before COVID. So we'll leave it at that. And even then, the overclassification, right? There's never, there's tools out there. We all go through training. Hey, what is CUI? But we have talked to multiple OSCs who receive PowerPoint presentations or documentation that should not be CUI and is labeled CUI. I see it on the National Guard side. We've had to stop people from taking pictures of a slide deck because they labeled it CUI, but it's not actually CUI, right? So I think there needs to be a little more education on the DoD and DoW side to ensure that they are not sending over-classified information out, right? That they're appropriately classifying it. And I know that not everybody has, a .ctr or .mil or .civ account, but you now have to select classification before you send an email, right? And even working on the SIPR side, you see stuff that's sent that, well, you could have sent that on NIPR, okay? So I think there needs to be a healthy education and understanding of how to move forward. I think they need to maybe help figure out how primes can do flow down to ensure that these smaller non-traditional companies, like maybe someone who builds the doors for the skiff or, makes some bolts for a fighter jet, right? How can we control that? What is the CUI? What is the FCI? How can we phrase things to ensure that we can incorporate people and still have safety of the data, right? And making sure that you're not getting, a supply chain hack from one of your smaller businesses that may not be held to as high a standard of you. And again, if you're following some of these level 2 rules, you should be able to identify things. And if you're doing training on your end, hopefully you don't click on a malicious link, right? But that would be some of the advice I have for the DoW is let's educate and make sure we're not overclassifying.
Yeah, so you hit a nerve, and I talk about this a lot. I talk about that big red button that has easy on it, right? So why not make this easier? It doesn't have to be overcomplicated to have us meet the requirements, right? So you add these extra layers, it muddles the water a little bit. It makes it a little harder, especially for those small to medium-sized DIBs that don't have the deep pockets and the resources available to them to make these significant changes, right? So if it was one thing I was, going to advise, whatever they come up with, make it easier, right? So